Hello, my name is May Kwong. I'm the Executive Director at the Center for Connected Health Policy. And on today's video, we'll be talking about the DEA proposed regulations for controlled substances in telehealth. Please note that this video has been recorded on March 20th, 2023, and we are talking right now about proposed regulations that the DEA has issued. These are not final yet, so they are still pending review and for public comment at this point. Before we get started, a few disclaimers. Please know that any information provided in today's talk is not to be considered legal advice. It is strictly for informational purposes. CCHP always recommends that you consult with legal counsel if you are interested in a formal legal opinion. And additionally, if I happen to mention company or show a picture of some product, know that neither I nor CCHP has any type of relevant financial interest, relationship, or affiliation with such a company. For those who may not be aware, earlier this month, in March of 2023, the DEA proposed two new rules for prescribing of controlled substances when telehealth is used. One was titled Expansion of Induction of Buprenorphine via Telemedicine Encounter, and the other one was Telemedicine Prescribing of Controlled Substances when the practitioner and patient have not had a prior in-person medical evaluation. These two rules were issued or proposed because of the end of the public health emergency, which is scheduled for May 11th, 2023. Once that public health emergency is declared over, the pandemic exception for prescribing controlled substance with telehealth will go away. So officially, with the public health emergency ends on May 11th, 2023, by May 12th of 2023, you will no longer be able to prescribe a controlled substance via telehealth without having an in-person evaluation with the patient or fitting in one of the pre-existing conditions that allow you to do it or exceptions that allow you to do it. So in response to the end of the public health emergency coming to a close, the DEA proposed these two new rules. Now, these rules were published in the Federal Register on March 1st, 2023, and there is a 30-day comment period. So as I said at the beginning of this talk, these are proposed rules. They are not finalized yet. They are open for public comment, but that comment period is quickly approaching. It will be on March 31st if you go from 30 days from March 1st. After that comment period, the DEA will review the comments that it received, and it may or may not change what they had initially proposed. So we expect after they have received the comments, they have had time to review it, that something will be published before May 11th, 2023, in order not to have any type of gap between the end of the public health emergency and what you're able to do with prescribing and telehealth. So what does the proposed rule say? So as I mentioned, there are two of them. So we'll take the one first that really focused in on just using telehealth in general. So what current law says is that there are about 7 exceptions which you can use telehealth to prescribe a controlled substance, and you don't have an in-person evaluation from the telehealth provider of the patient. Now, if you have seen the patient in person, you've done an in-person medical evaluation, and then you prescribe over telehealth, you're totally fine. So you've had that in-person visit. But the DEA has said, or federal law has said, like, well, if you haven't done it, there are these certain specific scenarios where you can use telehealth and you don't have to have had that in-person evaluation. And these were actually in federal law and regulations prior to the pandemic. So this is nothing that COVID-19 put into law or regulations. They already existed. And the exceptions are you have treatment in a DEA registered hospital or clinic. You have treatment in the physical presence of a DEA registered practitioner. So you're in, like, say, with your primary care provider, who's a DEA registered practitioner, and during that visit, when you're there with that practitioner, you have a telehealth visit with a telehealth provider. So that, takes care of that. So that's fine. That's one of the exceptions that's allowed. Or you're being treatment from Indian Health Services or tribal practitioners, or your treatment by a practitioner who has a special registry. Now, a special registry has not been created yet, so that technically that's a way that you can do this without having the in-person evaluation, but since the registry hasn't been created yet by the DEA, that's not an option that exists for folks. During a public health emergency, what we're under right now, so that means when it's over, that sort of channel for you to prescribe without an in-person evaluation goes away. Treatment by a VA practitioner during a medical emergency, And then I highlight this one, other circumstances specified by HHS and DEA. That is what they're doing now with these two proposals. They've like relied on the number 7 option of like, well, they can say specific scenarios in which you can do this without having the in-person evaluation. And that's where we're in right now. So what are they proposing? So by relying on option number 7, the DEA proposes to do this. They're going to create narrow exceptions for allowing telehealth to be used to prescribe a controlled substance. So what are those exceptions? The first exception is a DEA registered practitioner can prescribe a 30-day supply of non-narcotic Schedule 3 to 5 medication without an in-person evaluation. So keep in mind what that says. It's a 30-day supply, and it's also a non-narcotic Schedule 3 to 5 medication. So it's a smaller band of medication that you can do. Or, you know, the other exceptions that I just went over that's in current law, they still stay around and you can prescribe that way. But what they're saying is, you know, the exception we're creating now is a 30-day supply exception, but it's only for non-narcotic Schedule 11 or Schedule 3 to 5 medication. So that's one exception that they're allowing. They said now if you want to go beyond the 30-day supply, then you need to have either that in-person evaluation with the patient, or you fall into one of the other exceptions that is on the other side of the table there, or you have a qualified telemedicine referral, which is something new. Now, what's a qualified telemedicine referral? Well, they tell you in this proposed rules, they said a qualified telemedicine referral is where a DEA registered provider has an in-person evaluation with the patient and sends all the information or referral to the telehealth provider. So think of that as kind of maybe the asynchronous version of like one of the other exceptions on the other side of the table there. So you go in, you see your primary care provider. You're not having your telehealth visit like at the same time that you're physically there with your primary care provider, because then that would like fall into one of the other exceptions. But you see your primary care provider, you like go through everything. Primary care provider thinks that you can benefit from seeing like another practitioner who may want to prescribe something to you. So they write up everything, they send it to this other practitioner. You then meet with that practitioner via telehealth, and they say like, yeah, you know what? I think like, you know, you could use like this medication, and then they prescribe you something, and you've met the qualification. You've met a qualified telemedicine referral. So the narrower exceptions, if you want to like add something onto this other list here, is that there's a 30-day exception for non-narcotic Schedule 3 and 5 medication. And also now there's this qualified telemedicine referral that can be used as well to prescribe a controlled substance. So what else did they say in these proposals here? So they do address like what happened during the public health emergency if like the relationship between the telehealth provider and the patient was completely telehealth. If all you've done is just like establish the relationship via telehealth, you didn't fall into one of these other exceptions that's on the other side of the channel under current law, or you'd never had like an in-person evaluation with the patient, they're saying, okay, for those relationships where you didn't do any one of these, didn't have an in-person evaluation, or you don't fall into one of these other exceptions, we're going to give you guys a 180-day grace period to check off that box there, to like either have an in-person evaluation of the patient or fall into one of these exceptions here. So they give you 180 days for those like completely telehealth relationships formed underneath the public health emergency, just completely through telehealth, to meet your in-person requirement or fall into one of the, or use one of the other exceptions there. So that's what they're saying as far as like those relationships are concerned. Now, remember, I said that there were two proposed rules. The other one was very specific. It was hyper-specific. It involved the prescribing of buprenorphine when you're treating an opioid use disorder. So this is, if you want to view it as another way, it's a little sort of like other carve out as well, because remember, buprenorphine is a controlled substance. So the previous proposal where they allowed you to do the 30-day supply, it was only for a non-controlled Schedule 3 to 5 medication. So that would have eliminated buprenorphine. So they carved out an exception here for buprenorphine, but only if you're treating an opioid use disorder. And basically they're saying like the same sort of exceptions and requirements applied that what we went over. So basically, like, again, you can do like a 30-day supply of like buprenorphine. They'll allow that as well. But, you know, after that, you can't like give another prescription for it. You're going to have to like meet that in-person evaluation in some ways. And then like it's the same sort of in-person type of exceptions there, like we went over on the previous slide. Maybe they had like we're in a DEA registered facility at the time that they're that you have like a visit with a telehealth provider, or you have like that qualified telemedicine referral. So those sort of exceptions or allowances to meet that in-person evaluation will kick in here as well. But basically this was carved because buprenorphine is a narcotic Schedule 3 drug. This was carved out specifically so to be able to like have like this flexibility to prescribe it, because in the previous one, the 30-day supply was specifically for non-narcotics. So they gave that to the buprenorphine one as well too. The other thing that is in the DEA proposal that we did not see or don't have in current law or in current regulations are some very specific requirements that they're going to have on telehealth providers. One of them is to review the prescription drug monitoring program data. And this is just to ensure that when you prescribe something to a patient, they have not been given a prescription for a controlled substance before, or you're aware of like maybe what they've had before, just so you know what their history is, and also certain record keeping requirements. A lot of those are basic type of things that I think probably practitioners are doing already, but they're very explicitly laid out and that you need to like have that information as well. And then there are other details too, but these are like the major things that are related to their proposed regulations. Now, again, I want to stress that these are just proposed at this point of when I'm recording this video, which is March 20th, 2023. So right now there's only about 10 or 11 days left for people to get in public comments on these proposed regulations. And if you have any issues with them or you have any concerns, you need to get in public comments. Otherwise, if the DA doesn't receive anything, they're going to take it as, oh, nobody is really interested or nobody has any problems with what we're proposing. So if you do have some issues or questions or concerns, I encourage you to send in those public comments. This slide deck is going to be made available along with the recording there. So I've hyperlinked the proposed regulations, and you can click on that and there is a spot for you to submit public comments. Again, we expect something to be finalized before May 11th, 2023, because that's the end of the public health emergency. But the deadline that you should be concerned about right now is March 31st. I would encourage you, if you do want get comments in, not to wait until March 31st. Like, try to get in them as soon as possible so that the DEA will receive them and you will be able to express your thoughts and your concerns regarding these proposed regs if you have them. That is it. If you're more interested in CCHP information or information around telehealth policy, please go to the CCHP website. Also, we have a newsletter that you can subscribe to. And thank you for attending or watching this video. Have a great day.